Hello! Welcome to Music of the 21st Century, DePauw University School of Music's annual composer residency and festival. I'm Eliza Brown. I'm a professor of music at DePauw and the coordinator of the festival, and I am thrilled that over the past several months, we have been able to welcome Lisa Bielawa, our fantastic composer in residence, into our community virtually. She's worked with our students in a number of different ways, ultimately creating a brand new participatory work called Broadcast at the Crossroads in collaboration with students, faculty, and staff. We'll hear the premiere of that work later in this concert. But first we'll hear performances of two of Lisa's solo pieces by members of the DePauw School of Music community. And we'll hear from Lisa and from DePauw student musicians about the process of creating the broadcast. After the show, we'll have a live talkback with Lisa, so if you have questions for her as the show goes on, go ahead and put them in the YouTube and Facebook comments. Before we begin, I'd like to warmly thank Robert and Margaret Schmidt, DePauw alumni whose generous support allows this festival to happen every year. I'd also like to thank all the DePauw students, faculty, and staff who have contributed to this festival in myriad ways. It's a real community event every year, and it requires all hands on deck. And that's particularly important this year when we're doing everything virtually. So the last person I'd like to thank is Lisa herself, whose work as a composer and whose time in our community has really embodied that spirit of community participation and collaboration. To everyone listening at home, thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy the concert.
Hi, I'm Lisa Bielawa, and it's a wonderful pleasure to be able to welcome you all to celebrate this music making that I've been doing with the DePauw community and share it with all of you. And I just thought it'd be kind of fun to mention the relationship as I see it between the two things that inspire me most in my collaborations with performers. One of them is community, of course, is a very big part of my way of making work, and we're going to hear later the world premiere of Broadcast at the Crossroads. But another thing that inspires me, for really similar reasons actually, is virtuosity. I feel like when we encounter a virtuoso performer, we can wonder together at what human beings can do, and it's a chance for us to feel the transcendence of human endeavor. Just as community allows us to feel the transcendence of human endeavor. And these two pieces, you just heard Vireo, Canons, and Chorale. It was a study for an opera about a girl named Vireo, who is a teenage girl who lives in many, many centuries in her lifetime. So she hops around from century to century. You heard the sort of range of her human experience in May's performance. This next piece, the great Plasto-Dio Dada drama that Landen's going to play, is a kind of an absurdist look at the Dadaist experiment. The Dadaists had very, very high ideas, high ambitions for their work, but the work itself was often somewhat flimsily constructed. So this is a celebration of a sculpture that had very high ideals, but actually fell apart right after it was constructed. So enjoy. The idea of working with prompts came from really a year ago, the beginning of Broadcast from Home, when I was thinking about how to reach out and encourage people who are not necessarily writers and not necessarily singers, right, to sort of participate in a piece. So this was very different from our collaboration, because these were people who were really just, they were part of my community in that they were just human beings stuck at home, which made me connected to them. So I started speaking to my friend Claire Solomon, who's a professor, a literature professor at Oberlin. She uses prompts a lot in her teaching. She teaches writing, and so I started learning about how to use prompts. And really, she was my archivist, and she came up with the prompts for Broadcast from Home. How to have very carefully curated ways of soliciting participation from people that could help them feel like they could open up to each other and also help their creativity spark. And I sort of took it from there and kind of diversified and kind of expanded on that practice that I learned from her with language, and started to find ways to do that in the musical parts as well.
It was much deeper and it felt like more of an ephemeral experience, but much more present and in the now, and it doesn't have to like last and be something that like you perform over and over again, and it's so different from what we normally do as at least classical singers.
I think for me, I was trying to, so on some of the parts where you like repeat, so like the invisible part, like I can turn invisible, I like tried to sort of say it a bunch of times in different rhythms. I tried to like, you know,
Yeah.
make a sort of variety of different rhythms, just me
Yeah.
experimenting.
I kind of do it in a combination of like how I feel and like what sounds good to me personally. So it's like a lot of it's just my subjective ear in terms of um, what I like to hear or what I like about my
good.
like personal style.
And especially playing the guitarón, like violin, you do a lot of improv and like that's like a thing. But guitarón, they give you like 3 chords and you follow those chords like in mariachi. So it's been really interesting to like kind of experiment with that and like do my own thing on that instrument.
It was kind of like almost like a spiritual connection to
Isn't that interesting?
yeah, just to hear the and to sing the text of what my friends and colleagues and what they're doing,
Right.
what they're up to, in their own little worlds.
There was like a variety of things people said. Like I've learned, it could be anything from like I've learned how to take care of myself better to I've learned this new TikTok dance. I mean, it was just like it equalized
Yeah.
all of those things, and it just made us feel like even if we didn't learn something, I mean, huge, I guess in our sense, it still, you know what I mean, we learned something. We all learned something, no
Well,
matter
it's all
what.
it's all beautiful because it's all human experience, and we're trying, like Katie said, we're trying to reach out to each other, and we only have what we have, which is what we have in our sphere, and you guys shared those things with each other, and I was sort of touched by that.
A year ago, I was with a group of people, Patricia Schulke, John Cotton, Noel Johnson, and Melanie Roma. We were in a practicum group trying to make a project that made people think about the sounds of their environment. We intended to record different sounds in different locations on our campus, and then like switch what building they were playing in, essentially, like playing them through loudspeakers, the sounds of the dining hall and like the science building, which is traditionally a very quiet location on our campus, and seeing like how that would make people feel or how that would change their experience in the environment, essentially. But then, we got the news that our campus was going to shut down for the rest of the semester. And we ended up deciding on sort of having them preserve the sound environment of campus pre-lockdown, essentially. And we uploaded them to YouTube and put the photos associated with those locations with them. And a lot of people like studied with it as ambient noise or just kind of listened to it and let the emotions of not being on campus anymore wash over them. And it ended up being a really impactful experience for me to be a part of. And I think it resonated with a lot of the DePauw community as well.
But I stumbled upon them. I think it was like either over the summer or like in the fall, and I was like kind of ecstatic about it. I was like really happy to hear it. Yeah, so it brought back a lot of memories and the places and stuff like that. Um, so I was just like, I don't remember all the emotions I felt at the time, but they were just like overwhelmingly positive. I was just really happy to get some semblance of like what campus was like before.
I mean, for me, I'm a freshman, so I haven't really
Oh.
lived on campus yet. So that was awesome for me to hear that because I mean, I'm still home in New Mexico. I think I visited campus once or twice for like auditions to get into the School of Music. So hearing that though was awesome because yeah, like I don't know what it's like to have a normal campus life. And my first year was different than all of your guys's, obviously. So it was really neat to hear that in the orchestra rehearsal. I was just like, oh my gosh, like there's people, they're like happy, they're talking with their friends, they're eating together. So like, I miss that in my world, but to hear it specifically at DePauw was just like really cool. Like it was cool for me just because I haven't experienced that yet.
It really meant a lot to me to like kind of get that memory back because it was so tainted with, sadness and regret and, like anxiety at what the future was going to be. So I think in connection with this piece, I like really appreciate the fact, and it is kind of, we're forced into this situation to be safe, but as well, everyone to have their own voice in their instrument and to put it into this, piece. And when you listen back to it, you can kind of hear your friend's laughter or hear their expression through each of them playing their instrument and just being able to kind of repicture that memory in a different way, in a different context. I think is amazing. So I'm really excited to hear it.
It took time and experimentation, like Sangeeta said, to get out of that rigidness, to feel like, all right, I can explore as myself, and there is really, nothing that I can do that's wrong in a way, like, the lift or the blending or the, all these things, that you always got to keep in the back of your mind, it's like, no, it's me as an expression.
I have some capabilities that I didn't know I had, like creating phrases out of something that isn't there, and reinforcing some of the experiences that I've been through and giving voice to that in a meaningful way, whether or not it sticks or anything, like just being okay with singing something in the moment and being like, okay, delete, and then do it again, and then do it again. Like the
Welcome
repetition.
to composing. That's composing.
Right?
I suddenly started to realize, this isn't just a project with me and some students at DePauw. This is a project that addresses itself to the predicament of an entire generation. That's you guys, And what you were saying in some of these things, I mean, letter D, right, that section, right? The things that I heard you, that I saw you come up with there, I just thought, my God, I mean, this is an incredible, there's such resilience, there's such acceptance, sadness, just sort of self-regard, sort of a calm forbearance, these qualities that people learn at some points in their lives. You guys are learning them now, and I guess I've learned a lot from you. And I guess what I sort of hope is that you continue to feel that we, of other generations, that we are listening to you.
Intentionality, fragility, unpredictability, reality, absurdity, adaptability, maturity, ability, serendipity, possibility.
Wow, Lisa, thank you so much. That was just incredibly gorgeous.
Thank you.
And moving.
Really, what a process. What a great bunch of people.
I really, it's just incredible to hear all of our students playing together and singing together,
right?
Which hasn't happened for such a long time.
Are you muted?
I think we got rid of the ghost in the machine, yeah?
Are we,
I think we're good, yeah?
Okay. Well, let's just keep talking.
Okay.
So we have the opportunity now to, if anybody who's watching live has any questions for Lisa, please go ahead and put those in the comments on whatever medium you are watching on. And we can have a multimedia conversation here. Just to start off with a little bit of conversation as questions come in, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process that you went through after receiving all of the recordings from DePauw students. We kind of last saw you at the point where recordings were starting to be finalized.
That's right, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, on a mundane level, the first thing that has to happen is, of course, everything gets thrown into a big, you know, into the editing software, and most of the composing happens in the editing software. I use Pro Tools, and I gave, as you saw probably in the video, there sometimes when there's letters, you know, I gave people, they were organizing their recordings. Each person sent 5 recordings in, so they were organized by A, B, C, D, and E. So I kind of knew that there would be 5 sections to the piece, or I thought that there might be 5 sections to the piece. But you know, as you saw, section E, for example, for some players, section E was just 5 words and an invitation to improvise on them. You know, so I put everything in there, and then the really fun part is like Christmas. You know, was just basically listening to all these things, and people were talking to me, and they were, you know, I laugh out loud sometimes when I open these things because they're so inventive, you know. So then it becomes a matter of sort of figuring out, because the materials I gave were obviously harmonically, there was some control, you know, so that I didn't end up with just chaotic, you know, just a pile of things. So there was a sort of balance between letting the really like unexpected wonderful things that fell into my lap, letting those sort of determine the direction of the piece, while also just sort of holding together the sort of basic kind of harmonic, you know, flow of the piece that I had sort of, you know, elicited by giving limitations on various improvisational forms. But even the harmonic content, you know, changed. I mean, there were notes I wrote that functioned differently in the harmony than what I had imagined, just because of what somebody else improvised, you know. And so it's an incredibly intuitive process. I'm talking like I know what it was like, but I don't really remember. I mean, it's very intuitive. I go into like a zone, you know. It's fantastic. It's a great pleasure doing this work.
Yeah, it sounds like you get to sort of rediscover the material all over again.
Yeah, and stuff that isn't even the material. I mean, just, you know, find, you know, just learn and get to know them too. I mean, I just feel like I got to know these people, you know, the sense of humor. I mean, you know, I know who you are out there. I heard all that stuff.
And how are you thinking about time? Because the word time becomes sort of a theme in the piece, and people were saying things about time. So I'm curious how that influenced any of your decisions about the structure and timing.
Well, you know, the last section ended up being this kind of fever dream. You know, I feel like it's sort of time was this sort of like, you know, half, you know, when you're half awake and you just don't know, is this a dream or not? And, you know, or like a lucid dream. I don't know if any of you lucid dream. I have lucid dreams where you know you're dreaming, but you stay asleep, and you know. So I think there is a sense in this piece that it goes from sort of a mundane kind of, I can do this, I can do that, I draw a giraffe, I learn to play Animal Crossing, and and then there's a kind of a sense that there are more sort of epic things that we've learned during this time. And so in some ways I feel like in that section time starts to slow down, we start to zoom out. And then at the end of the piece I feel like it kind of goes into this sort of floating, this timelessness, which is a little bit like what all of us are feeling right now, right? Because we don't have any idea how long we're going to be in this sort of bizarre transitional universe we've been living in that we're strangely accustomed to already somehow. It's weird. So I felt all that come through in the performances, but I also feel it. I feel it too, So I think it came through in the piece.
Yeah. There's a question being typed into my question document as we speak. So I will, I think I see the full version of the question. So I wonder how working on this piece has shaped your ideas for the future. Are there new avenues that you'll be pursuing because of things you've learned from this? Will the broadcast project change?
Wow. Yeah, I would have to say absolutely yes. I think from this process, I gained faith in a level of openness with the material I gave, right? I opened it up even more. And if I have enough time with the collaborators, like we had time together, the students and I had time together, we got to know each other, and there's a kind of a sort of a spirit of the thing. If we really are a team that way, then I feel like I can leave things even more open, and yet when it comes back in, it will hold together. And a large structure. This piece turned out to be twice as long as it was, right? Because it just so many amazing things came in, and I think the structure holds, but the amount of freedom that the students had in the actual generation of material was pretty groundbreaking for me, to be combining that kind of structural control, the desire to give an experience that had kind of an emotional architecture to it, while also giving just maximum freedom. I think I've figured out, with this project, I don't know, we'll see, maybe I was lucky, and next time it'll all tumble down like the Dadaists. Wonderful performances, by the way, May and Landen, it's really fantastic. But I think I learned something about that this time that I can take with me,
Yeah. No, it definitely holds together. It's really it's wonderful to hear. I feel like you can hear when someone is playing freely, or singing freely, and is sort of inventing. Absolutely. And so it's wonderful to be able to hear that sort of spirit of invention, in a piece that is now a piece of fixed media.
Well, and you know what? I need that. Like, I live by myself, and that sort of feeling that freedom and that presence, to me, that's company, and that's why I don't ever work with click tracks. Just so some of your listeners, your watchers today, nobody used a click track for this. They were not allowed to use a click track. So everybody was playing freely with the prompts and the information they were given. And when things aligned, it was lucky, or I found people who played together as if they were someone separated at birth. I let the material itself show me those kinds of relationships. But yeah, that freedom, that's kind of what it's about for me, is, because that's the way that we keep each other, that we give each other vitality, right? That we keep the fire alive during this weird time when we're all separated from each other. That's what I want from these kinds of, times, these kinds of musical times together, like the ones I've been spending, with the students. So.
Yeah, that's you're starting to talk about the relationships between material. We have a very specific question about material here, which is B-flat chords seem really prominent. Was that a conscious decision?
Well, yeah, if you heard a chord, it probably was in there because it's hard to sort of, but just by chance, get a chord. But there was in the last section, for those of you composers or musical geeks out there, in the last section, I did have a kind of there was a relationship between each word that I gave, and a kind of a sort of an expanding, not a circle of fifths. It was like a circle of, I don't know, whatever, major thirds or something. That sort of spiraled out, and the ascending people, in the right hand of the piano, the treble people reached it this direction, and then the bass people reached it this direction, going through these, and that it kind of gives a sense of expansive, sort of a constant, sort of an expanding universe, like those animations you see of the universe, and you zoom out and you see, and it's a solar system, and it's the universe, and it's like has that kind of feeling to it. It opens out from the center.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
A sense of possibility,
perhaps.
perhaps.
Sense of possibility, right? That doesn't say anything about B flat, but B flat was in there, and had a role in that particular architecture. That's the kind of architecture I mean. It doesn't. You don't have to specifically assign every note and rhythm to an orchestra in order to decide that an entire section of the piece will unfold according to a logic like that. You can just give material that will support that. Give enough material that will support that, so that there can be room for crazy, unpredictable, alto sax solos also, and that it will frame, it will be supported by that. So,
Mm-hmm. So you're kind of creating some pillars,
yeah.
And
exactly.
then you don't know exactly what roof is going to go on those pillars.
Right, or what
Yeah.
floor or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Well, so far I don't see any other specific questions.
Okay.
I wonder if there's anything you would want to say, just to kind of close things out here.
Well, I guess I would just say, this is a time of transition for people, sort of coming back into the world, and I think I just feel very fortunate to have partnered with a community right at the moment when there was a new relationship with learning just starting to take shape. So, I hope we will stay in touch, and I hope to hear how it all goes. But I also hope that everybody who participated in this project, can feel how valuable their own year is, even though they might have spent it in their own living room. It matters what we all learned this year. It's important, and it's gonna determine the future. So, yeah.
Well, I think many of us at DePauw have learned a lot from you this year. And so I want to say thank you again so much, Lisa, for all of your collaboration and creative workarounds for all sorts of things in the virtual world. We really appreciate it. And I would also, before we close out tonight, like to say thank you one more time live to the Schmidts who support this festival. Thank you so much. And to the productions team who helped us in many ways putting this evening together. So we would normally have a reception after our in-person concert. So I'll raise my glass of water.
I will raise a glass. I have a glass of wine poured.
And yes. So cheers to new music. Thank you again, Lisa. It's been such a pleasure to work with you.
Thanks so much.
And thanks, of course, to all of the students for your musical contributions. This piece would not exist without that and without your wisdom from the past year. So, glass of water. Thanks, to all the DePauw School of Music community members who have made this residency happen this year.
Thanks, Eliza.
And to all a good night.